right. Well, welcome everyone. We're excited to be here. This is the second day of the BRIC 2023 Summit. And today we are going to be talking in this panel, careers in games. Very exciting. I think there's some myth busting that we can do within games and the careers that we can have. And I have an exciting panelist for us to dive in and help myth bust and guide us and figure out all these different opportunities. So to start off, we have Christina Vrombrun. Did I do that right?
Yeah, close enough. Yep, perfect.
No, you do it now.
It's Vrombrun.
Vrombrun. I don't know.
Yes, all good.
Yes. Okay, good. Senior Program Manager, Riot Games. Michael Hamilton, like we were talking about the play. So we got that down. We went in a deep dive earlier about play, producer over at Riot Games. And then we have Kim Greenberg, Learning and Development Manager for Creative at Riot Games. So amazing group of humans with us today. I want, even though I introduced them by their names and title, I would love to kick off and have them share a little bit about them, their backgrounds, what inspired them to be in this industry, and then we can go from there. So Christina, can you kick us off?
Yeah. Hi, everybody. It's so great to be here today. Definitely excited to chat about Riot and how I got to the gaming industry. I've been a program manager for over 3 years. I came from the fintech space and I ended up transitioning into gaming just because I always had a passion for video games as a player and really wanted to work on different types of innovation and enablement events that impacted more folks on the tech side, especially in gaming. So that's really how I ended up here. A lot of my role as a program manager is focusing on different types of enablement events internally to really broaden the scope of what we talk about internally at Riot, whether it's Riot Tech News or wins, big or small. That's the bulk of my job, is focusing on video newsletters, podcasts, different types of internal events to really bring community and culture together for the folks at Riot Tech.
Awesome. Michael, jump in. Tell me a little bit about you.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, my name is Michael Hamilton. I'm a game producer at Riot Games. I had a very direct path into video games. I went to school for it in undergrad. Upon graduating, I moved to LA and started working in games. And at Riot, I'm a game producer for the League of Legends skins team. So I work with a team of internal developers as well as some external partners to manage the creation and delivery and quality level of a whole bunch of the skins and personalization content that goes into League.
And Kyle, bouncing over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. So again, Kyle Kim Greenberg, I'm a he, him. Yeah. So I think very opposite to Michael, my path into games was very winding and twisting. I'm 34 and I only started working at Riot in May, and this is my first job in games. Before that, I spent almost a decade working in higher education as a counselor and as a coach, doing some like program management and other things like that. I'd say the commonality in my career has been helping people, focusing on ways to help people figure out what goals they have, what career opportunities they're looking for. I ran Loyola Marymount University's Career Center for a couple of years and worked on their MBA program. So this panel and looking at career like advice and strategies and tips like that's really near and dear to my heart. I'm the youngest of 5. I have 4 older siblings who all have different developmental and physical disabilities. And so I grew up, by the time I was like 12, I saw the way that the world was set up to either serve me better than it was serving them or not. And it really kind of instilled inside of me this just understanding and passion and kind of being pissed off about some of those inequalities. And so really trying to figure out how can I serve other people, help other people navigate some of these challenges. My role at Riot is really focused on our creative department. So that's our artists, writers and editors, narrative, audio, video, creative marketing, other things like that. And my job is basically, do they have what they need to be successful? Do they have the tools? Do they have the knowledge? Do they have the skills, opportunity, other things like that? So very similar to what Christina does with her team. I'm serving these other groups of writers, making sure they can create the products that you all love.
Have you all been big gamers your whole life? Like, did you know when you were like 7 years old that you wanted to get into games? Anyway. jump in.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was 100% a huge gamer from the moment I could walk. My parents got me playing Pokemon. I remember watching Prince of Persia with my dad, just being like a huge gamer at a really young age, like Kirby, like all sorts of games that I just enjoyed playing with my sister and siblings, cousins, like all of that stuff. Just it was just really fun for me growing up, getting immersed in gaming. And then when I got into middle school, high school, that's when League of Legends started to become really popular. And I was really intimidated because I felt like maybe that wasn't a game for me. Typically, I had played like open world games and kind of like MMORPGs. I hadn't really played anything like a MOBA before. So I was definitely intimidated. But I remember I started getting more active in League when Echo came out, who is one of my favorite champions. And that got me really invested in the lore and the world building and how characters looked. All that stuff. And so from then on, I just kind of started getting really into Riot and the games that they were making at the time, which was only League of Legends. But I was so obsessed with how they designed like Kindred and Echo and Lucian. And I was just very fascinated by how they specifically worked on Black champions that it ended up making sense for me as I progressed in my career because I had done an English degree. I was thinking more of doing the narrative side of gaming. I wasn't really thinking about program management. I had no idea program management was even a job, to be honest. So it just kind of naturally progressed as I stumbled into program management that, oh, wait, I could actually work at Riot Games and be a program manager. So a lot of things kind of like Kyle winded on my path to let me get to where I am now.
Yeah, some of my earliest memories are, Pokemon, Kingdom Hearts, Legend of Zelda with my cousins and by myself, and long car rides with my Game Boy and things like that. But for me, the understanding of like, oh, people make these things and like I could be one of them too, didn't really kick in until high school. When I had just, rolled the credits on a game and I was like watching them all scroll by, and it just sort of like clicked for me that like, oh, this is a list of people whose job it was to work on this thing. I'm listless in high school and I don't know what I want to do when I get to college and application windows are starting to close. Maybe that's something that I could pursue. So I was kind of deciding between a very like boilerplate business school application path for myself and then applying to some schools that had a focus in video game as an undergrad program. And I ended up taking the chance and not looking back since.
Amazing.
Yeah, similar for me. I grew up a heavy nerd and gamer, heavy, very, very heavy. I think, Michael, you talk about it clicked the light bulb when you were in high school that people make this. I think that happened for me when I was like 29 or 30. I grew up in a very religious family. And for me, it was basically you can either help people, you can have a career that makes money, or you can do a job that you like. And you can only choose one of those things. So it was like, almost explicitly told that way to me as a kid. Like you can either help people, you can be successful, or you can do something you enjoy, but you better help people. And so there was like this really weird thing where I thought these were separate. And for a long time, I built a career that was really kind of ignoring my own needs and ignoring my own passions. And I like had to like compartmentalize it, put it on the side. And working in higher education, I'm surrounded by faculty, I'm surrounded by people with PhDs and EDDs, and I really had to kind of hide the like gaming nerdiness in me just because there wasn't a lot of people like me around me in my professional setting. So it took me a long time to start to realize, oh, these things can actually, I can blur these lines and find a way to actually combine this stuff. And I'm sure I'll talk more about some of how I did that at some point in time. But yeah, absolutely. It was one of those things where I felt like these were different parts of me. And the story of kind of figuring out how I can align these together and kind of be the same person in every room is really a big part of how I got into gaming.
I always find that fascinating when I listen to people and how they got into the roles that they've gotten into. Like my background, drawing and painting since I was 7, ended up going to school for business of the arts, and then fell into becoming a creative recruiter. I knew I wanted to be in an animation since I was 7 years old. That was my jam. But nobody ever was like, what is a good role? You can have a job as a creative. Nobody talks about these roles. Like nobody really talks about producing, and nobody really talks about learning and development. You know what I mean? Or programming. It's like there's so many. I think as a human we're complex, and We know the lead singer of the band role that everybody goes for. We know game design exists. We know, certain art positions exist like animator, but there's so many other facets within the business of whether it's game or animation or VFX, whatever, that creative business that we never talk about. And that's why I'm so excited about this particular panel, because we can talk about kind of the undercarriage of our businesses and all these amazing opportunities that could really fill your bucket in different ways. So you love gaming, but you're also this. And then there's a marriage of those things together. So I would love to talk about kind of jumping off of what Kyle was talking about, like how your current role fills those buckets, and like how you're like, at what point did you realize the position you're in now was actually a career path, and how you would like people and encourage people to pursue it. So Christine, I want you start off and talk about that.
Yeah, no, I think kind of to that analogy you gave, which I think is awesome. I think people tend to kind of gravitate towards a certain person in a band, right? Maybe you really like how the bass sounds, you really like how the drums sound, you like how the singer sounds. It's kind of where you end up gravitating towards. And I think the cool part, at least for me with being a program manager, to use another analogy, is it's like being an air traffic controller. If you always kind of enjoy being in an environment where you're managing lots of different priorities, you're helping lots of different people, you're getting to connect with different people. If you enjoy that, if you're the planner friend, like you should really consider program management. That's honestly the best way and the most straightforward way I can think of putting it. Because for me, I was always the friend who was coordinating brunches or knew what to get for somebody's birthday and was really good at breaking down how we were going to plan a birthday gift out and things like that. So for me, it just kind of made sense. I just never really thought about it. I was so focused as a student on going to grad school and maybe getting a PhD in English that I kind of missed what was in front of me, if that makes sense, in terms of program management. And I still honestly didn't know when I graduated undergrad. I still was planning to go to grad school. I had a lot of ambition, but then of course the pandemic hit. So it sort of interrupted my flow of going to graduate school. So I ended up taking an internship and working for a couple of months as an executive assistant intern, which was really valuable experience for me because a lot of executive assistants actually have program management responsibilities or do project management type work. So for me, I was learning a lot of that as an executive assistant intern. And then I got recruited to be a project coordinator intern. And then I became an associate program manager. So it kind of just snowballed from there. But nobody ever really sat me down and was like, you should do program management. It wasn't until I started trying things out in my internship. And then that's when folks started approaching me saying, hey, you're really good at organizing notes, organizing our meetings, making sure people are accountable. You should really consider program management. And that's when I started to take it much more seriously and thinking about how do I level up and upskill as a program manager with learnings, with certificates, with different things I can try to explore. But yeah, the pandemic definitely threw me for a loop because I wasn't anticipating staying in corporate. I was thinking of going to grad school, but I wouldn't change it because I'm really happy and I'm at a company that I really respect and admire. So it's been a good experience for me so far, but definitely if you're the planner friend, if you're out there and you love organizing events, you're really good at taking notes. Maybe you're like me and you have 50 different colored pens because you like color coordinating your notes. You should probably really consider program management.
And how does program management will pivot to producing? Because there's organizational skills in both of those. So what does that look like?
Yeah, I kind of would be curious, Michael, if you wanted to maybe chime in because you actually do that type of work. So I'd be interested to hear like what the overlap could be between our roles.
For sure. And as to like kind of how I got there and how I picked production and why I'm still in that role, when I was going to school, I could pick, my school had a couple different tracks for game development. They had design, they had art and animation, they had engineering, and they had production. And because I knew I wanted to make games, but I didn't really know what I wanted to do in that space yet. I sort of picked design by default because I was like, yeah, I've got ideas and I can figure out how to make them. And then over the course of that year, I, ran into some roadblocks, I ran into some frustrations, and I kind of had this crisis of faith in terms of like, I think I could do this job and I think I could be, I could be average at it. I could be okay at it, but I didn't have the same kind of drive for the types of iteration and the types of discovery work and the types of creative resilience I think that I was seeing in a lot of the designer friends of mine that I was seeing really excel and I was really respecting. And so I was, like, oh, maybe I'm not cut out for games. Maybe I should switch majors or drop out or whatever. And I was talking to my academic advisor, talking about the things that I enjoyed about what I was doing and the things that I just wasn't kind of feeling that passion for, like I could execute on them, but I wasn't sure if I would be happy doing them for the rest of my life. And he kind of stopped me and he was like, so you don't have a producer on your team, and all the things that you're describing that you like doing are the things that a producer would do on your team if you had one. Do you want to switch tracks into production? I was like, oh, that sounds great. So I did that, and then it was great because very similar to what Christina was saying, the role of game producer, different companies will define it differently, but the general sort of like table stakes of the role is you are focused on the people. The team is as much your responsibility as the game itself and the work that they're doing. There's some overlap with kind of like more direct, more traditional people management here, where the happiness of the team, the health of the team, the sustainability of the way the team works together and the way that maybe your team interacts with other teams at that studio or on that product, those are your responsibility. A lot of the times, more entry-level production roles can look like you're spending a lot of time in project tracking tools like Jira, Atlassian's tool set, Redmine, or for some indie companies, they really lean on Excel and Google Sheets for that kind of work. And you can also be in a lot of meetings, taking a lot of notes, doing a lot of scheduling, a little bit kind of that the skill set that you could really gain by doing stuff like executive assistant type work. And the further up you go, the more of your focus becomes on the way that your team works, the strategy that your team is working under, what tech solutions are we investing in, and it's a lot of working with subject matter experts to understand their perspective and understand their expertise, while keeping a little bit more of a zoomed out perspective on either the team as a whole, the product as a whole, the game as a whole, the company as a whole, and working with people to marry those different perspectives into kind of like a path forward. An example would be like in a meeting about how to solve a bug or how to solve a problem in a game, I'm very rarely the person in the room who's coming up with the exact solution of what we should do. I'm not an engineer, I'm not an artist, I don't have those kind of like specialties and that craft expertise. But what I can do is know the people who should be in the room to talk about that thing, be able to read a bug, be able to watch a video, be able to have an understanding of the product and the player's vision of what the product should be, look at it, understand what's wrong with it, understand how bad a thing is when we do a thing called triaging a bug. It's basically like looking at a problem in the game and saying, well, how bad is it and how many resources do we want to put towards fixing it? And then presenting that perspective to the craft experts in the room so that we can come to a decision that works for all crafts and most importantly works for the player. So we're not solving something from an art standpoint and creating 10 more problems for dialogue or audio 2 weeks later, that kind of a thing. That's one example of kind of like really like in the weeds game production work, I would say.
Great. And then from Michael producing to Kyle, like how do you fit into that mix? And like, do you work closely with these teams? Do you like, how much do you kind of cross-pollinate? What does that look like?
Kyle, you're muted.
You're muted.
You just had to get one out of the way.
Yeah,
I was just saving Christina and Michael from having to do it.
Yeah.
It's a really good question. I would say, so the original question in chat was, what's the difference between program management and production? And I would say being a program manager is really about it's almost like setting up a department. I think that's a pretty easy way to think about it. When you're a program manager, typically what that means is you have expertise in how an entire type of function for a corporate space should work. You have an idea of, what are some of the best practices? What are some of the key technology things that might, like the vendors and other companies you might need to be buying their products and using their products, things like Gmail, G Suite, Outlook email, stuff like that. It's understanding how do we actually, if like for me, my department has 700 people in it. So how do we do this in a way that all 700 people can use this if they need it? That's called scaling it. How do we scale something where one person needs it, but 700 people also need it? So can we get by with only serving 5-10 a week, or do we really need all 700 people to get access to this? So program management is typically, you have an idea of some of these really key, I mean, basically you're a hyper nerd. You're a hyper nerd about whatever that topic is, you are the expert. And then in this way, the company usually will hire you as a program manager to come in so that no one else has to think about it and you do it for them. So it's almost like when I describe my job, I almost describe my job as being like an internal consultant. So I'm a Riot employee. I'm not a consultant. I'm not some outside company, but I'm a Riot employee who they brought in to build a program, to run the program, know how to get the most out of it, know the parts of it, know how to sell it, know how to market it internally, and know how to ultimately, it would be this idea of like, what's the business case? What's the purpose behind these different things? And so knowing ultimately what's the benefit? How is this going to help Riot as a company be a better company? Is it going to help us retain employees? Is it going to help us attract employees and talent? Is it going to help us save money by doing something? Is it going to help us get the right skills to build the right next type of genre game that maybe we don't have the right skills to build yet? So it's really looking at these different things. And my specific area is this learning and development area, which is really just, I think the easiest way to think of it is, do employees have what they need to be productive? Do employees have the skills, the knowledge, the space, the mental health wellness? Do they like their job? Are they happy and productive? Or are they stressed out, frustrated because things don't work correctly, insecure because they can't do something they're being asked to do? So my job is really trying to make sure that all those negative feelings don't exist, and that people just feel like, wow, I can come to work and be really damn good at what I do, and I know why I'm doing it, and it's helpful and effective. So I think program management is, it's very infrastructure focused, which is when Christina was talking about being organized, liking details, planning, looking at like having a small little idea, but being able to take 3 weeks to think about it and really make sure everything works really correctly. I think that's really the program part. Production then might be a part of that program, or production, there might be multiple producers working in that single program or next to that program. And Michael, I see your hands up, so I think I'm going to tag you in to take up this next part.
Yeah, and the one thing I would say here is also like Riot is a very large company, and Riot is a company that's done a lot of work to define internally what different jobs are and what that architecture of jobs and structure looks like. At another company, at a smaller company, this kind of distinction between program management and like game production might not exist. The same person could be performing a role that overlaps what I do, what Christina does, what Kyle does, and also maybe some of what none of us do, because Riot's a company that's large enough to have like an infrastructure that supports kind of like all of that. There's, especially kind of at like indie companies, I think you might see like postings or people that have producer in their title, and they do a little bit of everything of what we're talking about. But yeah, like I really like the definition that Riot's done, and people who have jobs like Christina and Kyle's, because they're the experts in it, and it means that I don't have to try to figure that stuff out for myself, which is excellent.
There's a question in the chat, but which led me to what I was thinking kind of my next question, which is kind of skills and opportunity and education. And do we, like, are there roles that are entry level that don't require education? And are there pathways to different types of roles, and can you pivot at any time? So like on our kind of pre-check call or setup call, we were talking a little bit about Q&A. And when I was a games recruiter at Zynga and Disney Interactive, well, QA is 100% its own job, and you can make an amazing living out of it. Sometimes we also saw it as people who were interested in learning about games and getting into it, seeing if they're good, and then they were able to apply for some entry-level narrative design jobs or assistant producing jobs. So I would love to talk about kind of the need for college, the need for like, where does the entry level start? What are there entry levels? Do we need higher education for all of our positions? Like, what does that look like? You both have your hands raised, so I'm going to go with Christina first.
Yeah, no, I think that's a
And
great
then Michael.
question. I definitely feel like education can be helpful. I think what's important to level set here as well is everyone learns differently. There's obviously neurodivergent folks, neurotypical folks, there's all sorts of people. So it depends how you learn best, is what I always like to say. Some people like me really enjoyed having a lecture environment where I could take notes. I had a peer group I could talk to get help if I was stuck on things. So for me, university was really beneficial and something that definitely helped me tap into my strengths as a program manager, but I don't think it's by any means a requirement. I think actually what we're seeing more and more at various companies all over the country and honestly globally is that they're moving away from that language of you need X years to work at this company. A lot of companies are saying we need somebody who is really eager to jump onto a program and find solutions and make sure that the right people are in the room, kind of like what Michael was saying earlier. I think more and more companies are realizing that degrees are not a litmus test for success or achievement or thriving in that role, if that makes sense. So I think at least on that specific area, I would say like higher education isn't necessarily a requirement, but I do hear when folks are saying they're looking at jobs, because I was in that position as well of looking for jobs and seeing they want somebody with 3 to 5 years of experience. And I have like 1 year, if we're even counting me working at a bagel shop as an undergrad student. And I get it. It's frustrating, but what honestly can help is like a perspective shift. And so for me, I knew I wanted to work in the gaming industry, but I was getting rejected left and right by Riot as an undergrad student, as a recent grad, as like somebody earlier in their career. I was getting rejected pretty much consistently until like a year ago when I did start interviewing for different roles. And even those ones didn't work out for me at Riot, but it ended up with me getting into my current position. So what I would say is I worked in fintech for 3 years. I was not particularly aware of or interested in fintech. I just knew it was a job and it was something that I somewhat enjoyed doing and that I should probably stick with it. And I'm not saying like everybody should just go work in fintech, but try to find an industry that can help you level up the skills you're interested in. So like for me, because I knew I was really interested in program management after about a couple of internships I had done, I stuck out working in fintech because I felt like I already had gained resources. I had gained some of a voice internally at that company. And so I felt like it was a good idea for me to keep leveling up as a program manager and kind of see what other opportunities I could level up with internally, externally, figure things out, keep interviewing. And I would say there's a lot of like roles that don't necessarily have a one-to-one correlation, like executive assistants. People often think that, you're just running, fetching coffee or you're getting lunches, which that can be a part of the job because I definitely did that. But at the same time, you're also managing calendars. You're making sure people are aware of what deadlines look like and who needs to be in what meeting. And there's a lot of program management fundamentals. And so that prepared me to go into an associate program manager role. So not necessarily a one-to-one, you might not be able to get an associate program manager role right away, but if you have like even a food service job, if you've worked as a like manager at a restaurant, like guess what? You have program management fundamentals that you've done, and you just have to translate it on your resume into that associate program manager role or program manager role. So I'll let Michael speak because I know he's nodding.
Yeah, I have a lot of passion on this subject, and I'm going to talk about a bunch of stuff generally for games. And then I also, Jeff, I want to talk because I used to be a narrative design producer and hiring person. So I want to talk a little bit about narrative design specifically in that space too. But yeah, huge +1 to everything Christina said about finding ways to map the experience that you have to the requirements of the job that you want. When I was doing kind of like entry level applications and stuff to internships, before I had any professional experience, for production roles, I talked a lot about I used to manage technical theater teams like in high school and as like a side job during the summer. And that was managing a team of people under some pretty strict deadlines and also rules for safety, to work towards supporting a creative product and there was a lot of on-the-fly problem solving. There was a lot of like team management. And while the thing that we were making wasn't a game, it was utilizing a lot of the same skill set that I use as a producer today. And it was really good practice. And I think that that practice really helped me. And like Christine was saying, you can find that practice in a number of different ways. And there's many ways to exercise skills that you want to practice for game development, especially, and I'm going to speak to more of kind of like the direct on game development side, because that's what I have the most experience in. But there's a lot of free tools out there for making games. There's a lot of free tutorials out there, and utilizing those and utilizing those kind of like online resources, as well as, there's a question in the chat I see about getting a mentor to assist you. I think that, LinkedIn is a great place to reach out to folks. It's a service that is professional in nature. And so therefore the kind of like buy-in on reaching out for professional reasons is lower than someone's, I highly recommend not just finding people on their personal accounts on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter and reaching out on those. I know it's tempting because people are available and visible on those platforms, but they usually try to use those for more personal use. And when it comes to entry-level jobs requiring years of experience, there's this really interesting statistic about the way that people from marginalized backgrounds in an industry apply to job postings in that industry. And the basics of it is people from underrepresented backgrounds in industry tend to only apply to job postings if they feel like they fulfill between 90 to 100% of the written requirements. And people who come from backgrounds that are overrepresented in that industry tend to apply to job postings, even if they only fulfill, 40 to 60% of the written requirements. I've advocated for people to be hired that have applied to job postings that don't fulfill all the written requirements. And I would encourage anyone who has not applied to something because they don't fulfill all the written requirements to apply to it anyway. It is the people on the other side of that job application's job to decide whether or not you should move forward. And there's really no need for you to self-select out of that process if it's something that you're passionate about, and if it's something that you feel like you can advocate for yourself for if you do get the opportunity to get to an interview. I'm a firm believer in I am a lot better in an interview than I am on paper. And so like my goal with a resume and cover letter is always just to get to the phase where I can like talk to a human and sort of sell them on why I'm the right choice, even if I might not fulfill every single one of the requisites on paper. Someone in the chat mentioned if you fulfill all the requirements, you may be overqualified. That is 100% true. And if you fulfill every single requirement for a job role, it's likely that you'll get that job, but it's also likely that that job won't necessarily teach you as much as it could. And then specifically in regards to narrative design and experience level there, and this is also a little bit general to games, college and higher education can be sort of like an effective replacement to years of experience if you're at a school that focuses on developing games as part of their curriculum. But also, as someone who went through undergraduate education in order to get their role in games, I would also be the first to say that it's not necessary. The most valuable thing that college gave me was access to a community of other people around my age who had similar levels of time commitment, who wanted to make games together. And then we made games together. And the making the games is what taught me the things. Not to say that I learned nothing in my college classes, but the things that I use most in my day-to-day are the things that I learned by doing. And that's me and my learning style as well. And also educational programs on the game production front have gotten better since I was in school. But yeah, if you're thinking about going to school for games, there are some great programs out there if you're a certain type of person that will benefit from it. But I would also do your research and look into, online communities, free game jams, Discord communities, and ways to connect to other people who want to get into games, because there are a lot of you out there, and there's a lot of people who have that passion and who want to exercise that passion and who are looking for other people to kind of do that with. Yeah,
Yeah.
I think I've talked enough on that front.
No, it's 100%. All the things you said is true. And I think finding these alternative paths like into the world. I mean, if you're not going to go to college, you have to figure out, and you don't need it. You just have to figure out like how you're going to replace it and make your community and make those connections. And Kyle, I would love for you to kind of speak to it a little bit because you came from a different area of the world. You didn't go to school for it. You didn't have necessarily parents that supported you, or they thought that you couldn't have it all, whatever that mindset was. And so how did you kind of bridge the gap and make that community so you could get into the space you really wanted to?
Yeah, I mean, I'm exactly what Michael just talked about. I was that person who didn't meet 100% of the job requirements. I met a lot of them. It was just in a different career, in a different industry. So when I was applying to jobs, I started actively applying to roles in gaming and entertainment, probably around 2016, 2017. And people liked me. They were like, "Oh, you have good stuff on your resume," because at that point I had a master's degree. I'd already been working professionally for 5 or 6 years, but they just didn't get why I was applying to what that role was. They're like, "I don't get why you would come to gaming. I don't think you'd be able to really fit in this area." So, a couple of minutes ago, I posted a pretty long thing in the chat if you want to take a look at that, and I'll give the Spark Notes on it. And I think Michael nailed it, which is what I started doing is I was like, oh, I need to start walking the walk before I'm getting paid to do it. I need to start being in gaming spaces. I need to start interacting with people that are already in the field, already in the industry. I need to start actually creating stuff and having things to be able to show, like, here's what I've done in games, even when I wasn't working in gaming yet. And like I mentioned, wasn't getting paid to work in gaming yet. So I think what that looked like for me, and then I'll talk really specifically what that can look like for a high school student or a college student, or someone around that age group. For me, what it looked like was, it was the beginning of the pandemic, and there was this app that blew up called Clubhouse, which is basically this. It's panel people talking just without videos. And I realized that there was entire communities inside Clubhouse of people in games that would come and talk about gaming. They would talk about it from a fan perspective. People that created those games would be there. I was in a room one of the first days I used Clubhouse, and my little profile picture, the person above me was the creator of a game called Journey, which, if any of you know Journey, Journey is a beautiful indie game that literally made me cry, like when I played it, I don't know, 2 years earlier. It's about family and parenthood and motherhood. And my mom was dying of cancer at the time. And so it just hit me really, really hard. And then literally, like, my second day on Clubhouse is the creator of that game. And I was able to speak with that person. And so what I realized, and this is kind of my advice for all of you, is you all already bring things to the table. You are 16, 17, 18, 20, 30, however old you are. You've already spent 5 years, 10 years, 15 years of your life learning things, doing things, loving things, knowing those intricacies. Like Michael said, we're all hyper nerds. So you already have that stuff. And so it's really, really, really important for you to lean on what you already bring to the table and what you already know, what you already love, what you can already geek out about. If you were to sit on a panel and give advice about something or talk about something, what are those things? And then the advice that I'm giving is now supplement that stuff with being very strategic and very intentional. It's a Venn diagram. You have that thing that you bring to the table, and the other half of the Venn diagram is your goal, where you want to be going. So what I did is like, oh, I'm a career coach. I help students get internships. I love the gaming industry. I want to break into the gaming industry. So what I did is I tapped up one of the recruiters that I had a relationship with. She was a recruiter at Ubisoft who makes Assassin's Creed. She's now at Netflix Games. And I asked her if she'd be interested in doing a weekly panel with me where the two of us just give career advice to students trying to break into gaming, almost exactly what we're doing right now. And for maybe 5 months or so, her name's Maria Balaza. Maria and I did that every single week. And some weeks we had 200 people that would come through. And then when we were doing this, we had the composer who wrote all the original soundtrack, all the stuff for Halo. If you know Halo, the music in Halo is like industry leading. It's just a person who just was on Clubhouse one day, saw a room, came in, raised his hand, we brought him up on stage, and he started talking about that stuff. So through that activity, I met so many people. I was able to put on my resume that I was the person who created this stuff. I was releasing content, basically doing content creation like on TikTok or Instagram or Twitch, you know, those ideas. But for me, it was just on Clubhouse. But by doing that, I built relationships. I learned so much of like the language and the priorities and other things like that. And it just helped me build up my resume and have conversations with people and get to know people. So I think, like I mentioned, for you as high school students, college students, young adults, career changers as a 30, 40-year-old, wherever you might be, think about what you already bring to the table and then just lean into some of that other stuff that's very intentional and strategic. It can literally just be, you know, if you're interested in narrative design, we're going to come back to that because it came up. If you're interested in narrative design, you could literally just do TikTok reactions to some narrative pieces of different pop culture games. That could literally be all you do. Just let's say every Tuesday and Thursday, you release a 3-minute TikTok video where you watch and you highlight some really cool part from whatever the biggest game is right now. And you just point out some of those narrative beats and talk about what you notice. Like add in a little bit of that theory that you learned because you read some book about narrative design, but put it out there on a game that's hot and trending and you know, it's viral. People are paying attention to it right now. In TikTok, it'll blow you up. You'll get viral, whatever it might be. Or maybe you don't. Maybe it's only 100 views and that's fine too. But when you apply to this job, you can say, yeah, I'm applying to this narrative internship at Riot Games. Here's my background. By the way, here's the link to this thing where I have 300 videos I've made over the last year talking about narrative theory and geeking out on this. And it's like those type of things where you're going to meet other people who love the stuff you love. And that was the part Michael was ending on, is like, look for the people, like you probably see me, I'm talking fast, I'm getting excited because I care about this stuff. Look for the people that are like that on the stuff you care about too, and vibe with them. Reach out to them, be like, yo, Michael. And that's even how Michael and Christina and I are on this panel today. The three of us just met each other as new employees at Riot. And we're like, oh, we're all kind of cool. We like each other. I feel this commonality behind us. And we just vibed on some stuff. And so we just made some relationships.
I love all this. I love the encouragement of how we can create community. I love that we keep bringing up hyper nerd, which is a fun new term, but I think ultimately it's about finding commonality and finding your people. And if you're already here, you found your people. Like, we are all cut from the same cloth. We're all creatives in different lights. We all are here for the love of this industry. And so all of that, like, today is a connection. You are showing up, and that is so important. And when we talk about mentorship and connecting, when I was a recruiter, just as a recruiter, if I wanted to connect with somebody online, like, it wasn't enough for me to just reach out on a LinkedIn. Like, I had to do my research. Like, I had to make it, that person feel special of why I was reaching out. If there was an opportunity, say they were a Riot and I wanted them to come to Zynga, I had to make a case. And I also had to know exactly who they were and what their job is. I get people reaching out to me, and like, I used to work at Sony, and people will come and email me like, hey, I saw this job up at Sony. And I'm like, I haven't worked at Sony for almost 2 years. So it's like the people that don't do their research, who are just like, to me, like, if I'm going to spend time with somebody, I want to know that they put in the effort to do the research. So when you're reach out with purpose. Reach out because you are connecting with that person. And I'm trying to remember, team, remind me, there's Game Dev Map that kind of gives you a lay of the land of all the different kind of game studios out in the world. And then what is the IMDb for games, so that you can look at gaming credits and see who worked on all the games? What is that called? You guys remember?
Some credits are just on IMDb, but it's not, as far as I know, there's not a single resource that's like super up to date with like all credits. But I know what you're talking about. There is a gaming specific one that's not IMDb, and I'm just gonna look it up in the background.
Yeah, that's what I'm doing right now. I'm trying to remember. Oh, Moby Games. Moby Games, I think, is what it's called.
Yeah,
and so
that sounds right.
Oftentimes what I would do is like reverse engineer kind of how I would connect with people. So if there's a game or a movie I really like, I would go on, look at all the credits too. That also gives you a good idea of all these different positions that are out in the universe. And then from there, I would find some people, especially say if I was entry level, I would look at those individuals that are entry level and then try to start connecting to them because they're just one step above you. If you go to the person who's like the VP of games, that might be a little bit of a disconnect, right? You want to find the person who's 1 to 2 years just above you that can kind of give you that advice where you can start building that relationship, who might be open to sharing their ideas. People love to talk about themselves. So you've got to get to the point where it's like leading with curiosity and getting that person to talk to you about themselves. I think that's often a really good way. So I think kind of that eagerness and that energy and bringing that to your career is something that's kind of an important thing to do and will set you apart. And then not giving up. If you notice, all 3 of the panelists have done an amazing job of building their careers. And they also pivoted in ways to opportunities that they didn't even think existed, which I think is so inspiring. Kind of our last question, and then we'll continue with some of the questions from the audience. I would love to know if there was one thing, like a piece of advice you would love to give to your younger self, what would that be? I'm going to have Christina kind of start that off for us.
Oh man, I think Michael already said it, but don't let one no be a no forever. It's just a not right now. If I could go back in time and tell myself, like I remember distinctly the first time I had done an interview with Riot and I had gotten rejected and I was so excited. I was so optimistic. I was practically like beaming after the interview. I was just so happy that I had just done an interview with a company I really wanted to work with. And then the next day, I think I got that rejection email and I just could feel my heart like sinking. And I remember being really upset and really sad and thinking like, they don't want me to work here. They don't think that I belong here. Something happened. And then after a couple of days of eating a lot of Ben & Jerry's ice cream and just being sad, I eat a lot of
What
the
flavor?
half-baked,
Oh,
obviously,
okay.
half-baked, the best
Okay,
one,
no,
the
that's
best one.
That one is
If
pretty
it's
good. I'm a
gone at
Cherry
your local,
Garcia.
if it's gone at your local grocery store, it's probably because I'm like stockpiling it because it's always gone. But I remember being so sad. And then when I really thought about it after a few days, I realized the reason I had gotten rejected wasn't because I wasn't a good candidate or wasn't qualified enough. There are so many things outside of your control when you're interviewing. Like there could be an internal candidate. There could be somebody who has just more work experience than me. Like I was only a year out of undergrad. Like, of course, there are going to be people potentially better than me or maybe more qualified to answer certain questions in interviews. I had not really done a lot of interviews at that point. So I obviously was a little worried, a little anxious when I did the interview. That could have also happened. And then when I had gotten my current interview for my current role at Riot, I remember being like so shocked because I just the whole time I was thinking, I was like, this can't be it. This can't be the one. This won't be the job. Like I'm going to get rejected. I was like waiting every day for the rejection. And then when my recruiter called and was like, we're extending you the offer, I like muted myself. I like went outside and screamed. And then I went back in and like took it off mute and was very professional. Like, thank you very much. Like I was like acted very cool about it, but I definitely internally was like and externally screamed about it. But yeah, I had so many rejections. I honestly, it has to be at least like 30 rejections from like internships and contract roles and full-time roles. And I had literally a week before just gotten rejected for another Riot interview after I had done a couple of loops. And then my job popped up on LinkedIn. And I was like, well, what do you know? A program manager job with somebody who has 3 years of innovation and enablement experience. That's funny. I did that exact thing. And then applying for it, interviewing for it, getting the offer for it. Yeah. So one no isn't like a no forever. Like I never got a Riot internship. Those are really competitive, honestly. And just don't beat yourself up if you don't get the yes on the first time. It makes for a much sweeter story when you have like a whole journey of rejection and navigating that and improving on yourself. So yeah.
Love that. I love it.
I also never got a Riot internship. And now I'm here. So yeah. I think there's this quote from Star Trek: The Next Generation that like people have probably seen on like internet memes and stuff because it's very often screen capped. But it's Captain Jean-Luc Picard saying sometimes you can do everything right and still lose. That's not failure, that's life. And I think the biggest thing for me is going back and telling myself that, like, yeah, sometimes it's just bad luck, you know, like, and sometimes it's just good luck. And there's a lot of things you can do to set yourself up for success, to like jump on those opportunities when they come to you. But I would be misrepresenting the industry and the realities of like hiring practices if I didn't say that, like, sometimes you're just unlucky, and different people have different opportunities. Like I got my internship at PlayStation because I found out this like years later, like I had like missed the application window for most Sony internships that year. And it just so happened to be that due to unforeseen circumstances at that studio on that project with that team, they happened to have an emergent need for a production intern. That role opened months after it should have. That's when I saw it. That's when I applied. And I happened to be a good fit. And that's how I got my internship. And then I moved to LA, and I've done a lot of things since then. But in like, I equate that to luck as opposed to skill or like setting myself up for success. I didn't like network with a Sony person or like do anything before that point. And I had gotten a bunch of rejections before that, and I was thinking about like just taking a summer off and doing other things. Before, you absolutely do not need to live in LA to break in, Claire. I recommend no one move to LA unless they absolutely have to. There's, especially since the pandemic, there's so many remote opportunities. Yeah, but yeah, I don't want to ramble too long about that because I want to give Kyle time to talk about this, and I want to leave us a little bit of time at the end too. But like there is a resilience that will help you in this industry. It is not a perfect industry. There are a lot of companies, and there are a lot of situations, and there are a lot of things that will happen that will feel like losses and that will feel like setbacks. And some of those will be things that are under your control that you can learn from, and some of them won't be. And it's been really important for like my mental health and that resiliency to be able to the wisdom to know the difference kind of thing, not learn from the L's that I'm taking because they were unforced errors or whatever, but also like having the understanding to kind of like pick myself back up when the things happen that are not under my control, and have that acceptance of like, not my day, not my week, not my year, whatever, and keep trying and keep working towards the goal that I want to reach.
Kyle, to you.
I almost started talking before I was off mute again, so I had to double check. Damn, what advice would I give myself? I just had the longest time to prepare for this, and I did no prep. So maybe prepare for things quicker. I think one thing is, resilience is a huge thing. I'll very briefly in a second touch on that. But I think the other thing is that it's okay to suck sometimes. It's okay to be hurt sometimes. It's okay to be really mad and frustrated. It's okay to feel like you failed. It's okay to not want to get out of bed. It's okay to eat Ben and Jerry's for a week. Life's hard. Shit gets really hard sometimes. And I think we see through social media, even panels like this, there's a risk of just seeing the good stuff. There's a risk of just seeing the pretty polish when there's mountains and mountains of crap underneath it. And if we lie to each other and pretend like that stuff doesn't exist, it sets up this false reality that people are just like, damn it, everyone else has stuff good, and it's so hard for me. Why? I'm doing something. There's something wrong with me. It's me. And it's not true. It's hard for everybody. And so I think one thing is just to be okay with knowing my limitations, to not repress that stuff and pretend like it's not there and pretend like it doesn't hurt, but to let it hurt, to experience it for real, but then to move on, to know that it hurts, to let it hurt for while it hurts, but then to get back up on your feet and be like, now I'm stubborn. Now I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to try something different. I'm going to learn a little bit more. And that's the kind of moving into that resilience piece. it took me just at Riot, I think I applied 22 or 23 times before I got this job at Riot. I started applying in like 2018, 2019, and didn't get this job until 2021. Before that, I had started applying to jobs in 2016. I'm a career coach again. What I do is write resumes. What I do is teach people how to interview. What I do is talk with recruiters. And it took me from 2016 till about 2020 until I got out of higher education and actually broke into the entertainment industry. So the one thing, the only, if there's only one thing that made me successful, it's that I never stopped. Every time I was told no, every time I got a rejection, every time I didn't get an interview, I got a final interview. I got to 15 final round interviews at different companies, at Fox, at Disney twice, at Hulu, at Deloitte, et cetera, at Blizzard. I got to final round interviews and didn't get the job 15 times. But the one thing that got me to Riot is that I tried again the next day, or I tried again a week later. And there was definitely times where I was like, I need to take a break for a week or two because I'm neglecting other things in my life. This hurts too much. I can't do it. So I think the advice to myself is, like I said, like, feel all that stuff. It is okay. I am not failing. It just hurts. It just sucks. Doesn't mean I'm a failure. Doesn't mean it's screwed up forever. Doesn't mean it's not possible. But once you can accept all of that stuff and actually feel it, have that stubbornness to say, that was just one more no. Eventually I'm going to get a yes. I just got to keep getting no's until I get that yes.
I love that. I love resilience, because I think sometimes we have a moment where we internalize and project out, and that can come out as negative energy sometimes too. Like as a recruiter, I used to get emails from candidates, and they would be angry at me, or they would be like, why haven't you returned my email? Or why, it's like, I guess I didn't get the job when we haven't even filled the job. So it's like, always remember that people have good intentions. We know how hard it is as recruiting or hiring managers, what it's like to be on the other end. We are human as well. So humans are dealing with humans, and we all have big feelings across the board. So I think if we lead with good intentions, if we have this resilience, we know that eventually we find our humans and we get the opportunity. And it might not happen overnight. Some people it does. Some people, it can take a little bit longer. Sometimes you're 15 final interviews in, but you know what? Every one of those, I think, I mean, I don't want to speak for you, Kyle, but I bet you learned something about yourself, something new to add to your resume, something about like, oh, I could bring this up in an interview. So like, take all those experiences, what you might call rejections, and add that to your experience kind of bucket, and see how you can like use that to your advantage, not like look at it as a negative. Yes, Kyle.
It's the last thing, because I think it's touching on what you're saying, and Christina touched on this too. Got that interview, didn't get the job. You talk about recruiters. You as a recruiter, you had angry people. The other advice I'd give myself, and I'm giving all of you, is make friends with everybody. Help everybody out. Like earnestly look to see how you can help other people first. Make those relationships. Encourage people, give people ideas, tap people up, refer people for other jobs, elevate other people. And part of that is it's going to elevate you as well. And you're going to make real relationships with people. Like every interview I did along those times, I found those people on LinkedIn. I've added them. I got to learn pieces about them. I was like focused on, what does this person need? If I knew other people that might be a good fit for other future roles, I'd push people out. And so it's like, just look at yourself just as a human, ideally 90% of the time, to be helping and supporting other people and encouraging other people. And ideally, when people interact with you, they leave that interaction be like, wow, that was really nice. I'm really glad I spoke with that person, or I know that person. And that type of thing, that energy, that disposition, it's rewarding, and it feels good, and it's positive, even if you don't get anything out of it. But it's also going to help people trust you and want to help you, because they're also feeling you and seeing you helping them and other people as well. So it's this idea of just like this community social aspect of have each other's back.
I love this so much. I think the three of you are the yes and. and the encouragement we need to continue trying to make it in this industry. I love the idea that I feel the three of you have the philosophy of always taking the meeting and discovering something new about yourselves, and it's really inspiring. I really appreciate you being part of this talk today, this panel, the summit. You are inspirations, and please continue doing the good work, and have a great rest of your weekend.